Okay, so we're going to take a little tangent on a more fun front. I'm going to work on secret project number 3 here. And Tuck 1963 pegged it pretty much when he said an off-road Segway. It's actually what the only difference is it's like a seated Segway. So it's a two-wheel self-balancing, I guess you could call it a scooter or something like that, but yeah, I'd call it a two-wheel self-balancing Segway, whatever you want to call it. I'll include the link in the description below to the original article where the guy built one of these things, and in case somebody else is interested in doing it. It's actually, I expect it's not going to take me a huge amount of time to build this thing. Just one of those fun things, just a distraction for the hell of it. The hardest part is going to be building the frame, and I'm hoping that was one of the tubing bending tests that I was doing yesterday, and if I can do that effectively, it should actually be fairly easy to build the frame, and at that point it's just, you know, welding on brackets to support the motors and the controller and you know, like an armrest for the joystick and all that fun stuff like that. So I'm going to get to that and we'll see how far we got to go. I got to go to a wake in a couple hours here, so see what I can get done before then and after that. So this is what I'm making the frame of the scooter out of. This is one of the nicer page wire gates that I got lying around here to cut up. I figure for the main part of the frame I only need up to about here somewhere. I think actually further back, but nevertheless I'll cut extra. And then I will take this piece and cut it back to, I think it was around here somewhere, for basically 60 inches from the end. That's actually probably closer to here, but nevertheless. And I'll just have to straighten that piece there and I'll cut it off somewhere close to the bottom. And shouldn't leave me a lot of spare stuff for any kind of filling in, bracing kind of stuff. So I'm going to get to it. So here's the back frame for the unit. It's a little wider than I was anticipating, about 6 inches wider, but I might just leave it. We'll see. I'm going to just cut it in the middle and narrow it if need be. This piece is going to get bent into a hoop for the footrest, and any other scrap pieces lying around will get turned into armrests. But should be good to go. I'm going to try some bends on this less than straight piece and see how we go with that. I want to kind of get a feel for where the center of the bend is in relation to the length. I'm not sure how to explain this, because if it was a 90-degree bend, if I just cut and welded these into corners, it's a fairly simple matter of gauging, you know, like what you're doing. You're just measuring, you know, my width of this piece here is the piece I'm trying to do, which is 18 inches. You know, I do one 18-inch piece, two 42-inch pieces, and just weld them in the corner. But now I want to bend these, and because I'm bending them, the length is actually, since you're actually taking a shortcut, is actually slightly less than, you know, 42 plus 42 plus 18. So I don't need quite as long a piece, but it also means that in order to get 18 inches across, which is the outside measurement of it, the out, not center line of the tubes, I want to, yeah, I've got to, I got to do some tests, put it that way, and figure out how this is going to work before I do anything permanent. Now I can probably be off by a little bit. It's not a critical thing, especially considering the fact that I've just widened out my my thing a fair bit, but we'll see how we go here. Okay, so I've bent the pipe. It's not quite 90 degrees, it's about 93 degrees, so I'm going to have to give it a little bit more. I didn't allow enough for spring back. It looks like it bent the pipe fairly well, and I want to make the distinction between pipe and tubing. Pipe is measured by the inside diameter, tubing is measured from the outside diameter, and that's why this pipe bender will only work with pipe. It'll be useless for tubing, you'll just kink it. Now it seems to work quite well for this stuff. The only thing I notice is right here, you can see dimples from where these rollers were. If those rollers were the same diameter as the bending item, there wouldn't be any problem. if I ever want to do something really nice, I'll probably have to fabricate my own little rollers. I'll worry about that when the time comes. So, I just thought I'd go over, I'm trying to get the calculations right here, and a horse must be right out there. Sorry. A blue car! There he is. I am so easily distracted. Okay, so I'm trying to calculate these things here, and I looked at a couple of things here, and I looked at my pipe bender thing, and I believe that this is a quarter of a curve, so this would represent 90 degrees worth of bend. And what I looked at is I measured the outer diameter of this, or the length of this, so that I could determine how much of a curve that's bending through, and it ended up being 6 3/4. Now, that's important because you're cutting that corner. You want to calculate that. I'm hoping that I'm not going to just end up confusing people, but I'm just going through some of my logic so that maybe somebody who knows something better might come back and give a better explanation. But in any case, so half that curve is 3 3/8. So that would put that from here to there, that circumference, which is not really a full circumference, but that segment is 3 3/8. And that's important because I want to line up the center line of the, my curve on the tube so I can bend it at the right location. And I determined that this distance here, if you look at it this way, if you just look at this as a 90, this represents about a 4-inch radius, I believe. And that's important because you want to figure out where the straight segment ends and the curved segment starts. So I wanted a 42-inch length from here to the outside of the tubing, which I didn't take into account, but I'll get to that in a bit. And, so therefore, if I want to be 4 inches shy of the outside, I want to cut this off at 38 inches. 42 minus 4 is 38. Okay, so now I got to figure out where I want the center of the curve to go. So center of the curve is going to be 3 3/8 further beyond that. So I marked my tube off at 41 3/8 inches and bent it, as you see here. And then I measured the distance from the end of the pipe to the outside of this and found out I was 5/8 too much. And of course, that's because the outside diameter of this pipe is 1 1/4 inches. So I failed to take that into account and cut it, or made it 5/8 of an inch too long, which isn't too big a deal. This is just a test bend. This piece isn't even particularly straight. But I wanted to do it before I practiced on, or did the actual thing on a real piece. And this piece might actually be functional if I do the next calculation right. So now, what I want to do is I want to make this 18 inches from outside to outside. So what I got to do now is, this curve doesn't matter as long as I measure from this edge. That curve doesn't enter into any calculations. So what I want to do, and I know that my radius is 4 inches, so I got to come 4 inches back from the corner. So if I'm doing 18 inches, that means I want to go 14 inches is where the curve starts here, and I want to go 3 3/8 minus the 5/8 of the diameter of the, or radius of the pipe. And that should put me at 40 3/4 inches is where I mark my center line, and then put it in the die and line up that mark in the die at that location. That's not confusing enough. We'll see how this works. If I'm right, I'm good. If I'm wrong, I'm going to be annoyed, but it's not going to be a big deal. Now, if this is just too much of a pain in the ass, what I might do with the other one is I'll just bend them, at least 42 inches, trim it back, on that end, and then just cut them in the middle and weld them together, kind of a deal. But I'm hoping that my calculations are right, and we'll see how they go. Okay, you might have noticed in the last segment that I made a boo-boo in my calculation. It was confusing my previous calculations with my current calculation, and what I should have said was that the distance from here to the center of this curve, where it's going to meet with the center of this die, should have been 16 3/4, not 40 3/4, which is ridiculously stupid. Okay, so I'm going to mark that on here, 16 3/4, and bend this, and if I'm correct, the distance outside to outside should be 18 inches. So, wish me luck on that one. Okay, so the good news is that my calculations were correct. The distance from here to here is 18 inches, but because of the design of this unit here, a width shorter than 18 inches seems to be a bit of a problem here. What ended up happening was the tube that had already been bent, or the corner that had already been bent, started hitting this edge here, and I said, well, I'm going to see what happens, you know, and keep going. And what of course happened was that the roller that was on this side of the bend started to really press into the tubing. So you can see that that's going to be a problem. So it looks like there are some limitations to this sort of a setup, in that the distances that you can use are a little bit tighter than you might hope for. So I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to increase this distance if I want to do this, or I've got to just bend it in two pieces and weld it in the center at the appropriate distance, which I guess I can do is I can bend it at, let's say, 20 or 25 inches, whatever works out with the lengths of tubing I have, and consequently you know, cut it in the middle and weld it back together at the length or the width that I wanted at, which kind of defeats the purpose of all these calculations, but nevertheless, it's a learning experience for me. It does do pretty decent curves in pipe. You know, like it's a little bit flattened, but you have to expect that. But it's not kinked, and I think that that's more important than anything other than that. Anyways, I guess I'm going to bend the real piece and go from there. Okay, there's the center section all bent. I've figured it out that I think I can afford to go as small as a width of around, I guess it was about 4 inches off of what this was, so probably about a 22 inch distance. Now, as you can see, it's not quite, I got the width that I wanted, first off I'll say, or I got within the range. Maximum range that I wanted for the width was 25.5, and it ended up coming up to about 25.25, 25 3/8. As you can see, the floor is flat here. This is my flat floor reference, and it's not quite coplanar with this. So I'm going to just have to tweak that a bit. Now what I did to try and maintain, you know, both bends in the same plane was I leveled this, hence all the shims. I leveled all, oh, some of the shims fell out. That might explain something. Haha, this was supposed to be level. It's not anymore. So, that might explain why some of it was whacked. In any case, what I was meant to do was level this way, level it this way, which is still pretty close, and then when I did the first bend, it didn't matter. There's no way you could mess up on the first bend. Second bend, what I did was I brought that bend out here and I made sure it was level here. But obviously if this isn't quite 100% right, that little bit of off-planar on here can muss things up pretty good. I'm going to have to figure out a different way of doing this. But you know, in any case, it's all learning experiences, like the first useful bends I've ever made with this thing. So I'm pretty happy with that. And it should be fairly easy to straighten this out. I'll just take another pipe and I'll have to figure out how to clamp this, but I'll clamp it to something solid. And then I'll just refit a bit until it you know, both ends are in about the same plane. Then I'll cut them to length and flange the ends. But I gotta actually I'm going to go and get some download some templates off of the web. I don't know why I have to search for that word, but in any case, download that off the web, and then I can cut these flanges in it to meet. And flange is the right term? I don't know. They're the you know what they are. They're the cuts to make it meet flat against another piece of tubing. And in any case, what I'm going to do to this one now is hello dog and dog air pump. Is this one I want to tuck this one in at a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to just find about approximately 20 inches down. I have to kind of figure out how I want to do that so it clears the tires nicely. Bend that in at a 45-degree angle. Same again for that one. And then I'll start welding this thing together, and then I have to flange those ends at a 45-degree angle. Lots of fun, but this is actually a pretty simple frame. If I actually had any what's the millwrighting skills, this would be a very, very easy job. But in any case, I'll get to it. Okay, there's all the tubing bent to shape. To give you some idea of what I'm going to do, this tube will be fish mouth to meet that one, so that it'll all be lying flat. You can see it when I bent this one, it's slightly out of the same plane as the other ones, but that should be fairly easy to tweak into position. So basically the idea, or you can see the basic layout: lawnmower battery back there, 2 motors sitting at the back. You'll sit in a chair roughly on the axle. You know, you'll come forward, your feet will be resting on this, and you can lean backwards and forward to control your speed. And from there, you know, like there'll be you know, like a armrest that will come up here for the joystick, and another armrest that will come up here for the so there probably is still a little bit more bending to do, but it won't be anything major. It'll just be some more decorative things than anything. I have to make a seat for it as well. Probably it'll get a plywood seat initially, but in all likelihood the frame will be done tomorrow, and I actually should be able to have this thing rolling tomorrow. No big whoops, and then that'll complete most of this project. Actually, you know, the only other thing would be, you know, like the mount and the seat. I was thinking about making something like one of those bomber seats, but we'll see how we go here. So that's the end for today. That's my fun project, just a little diversion from this guy, since it was getting a little bit overwhelming. And we'll see where we get to tomorrow. Thanks for watching, guys. And just so that there's no confusion, I'm not using a solid axle all the way across. That was just, I haven't cut it to length, and I won't until everything's ready to roll. So, you know, otherwise that wouldn't work very well with 2 motors, 1 for each axle.